All right, let's get right into it. We're going to explore a really strange and honestly fascinating legal story. It asks this fundamental question about what it means to own something, a question that was settled, believe it or not, almost 100 years ago, but wow, does it echo loudly today. It all kicks off with a horse race, a really clever neighbor, and a huge idea.
So let's just start with the main question right up front. I mean, think about it. If you put on a big event, you create a spectacle, something awesome to watch, can you actually stop somebody from just, looking at it from their own backyard and then telling everybody else what's happening? That is the core puzzle we are piecing together.
And to really get our heads around this, to understand the massive impact of that question, we've got to go back, way back, to where this whole thing started, to a very specific place and time where this idea was about to be put to the ultimate test. So, picture this. The year is 1937. We are in Sydney, Australia. The city's buzzing with energy, and, as it turns out, it's about to become the center of a very, very particular legal drama. Okay, so our main character here, if you want to call it that, is the Victoria Park racetrack. And this was not just some small-time track. This was a huge deal. It was a major venue. People would pay good money to get inside, place their bets, and feel that thrill of the race. It was a whole business built on selling that unique experience. But there was a problem, a really big one. Right next door, a guy had built this tall wooden platform in his own backyard, basically a tower, just high enough to give him a perfect, crystal-clear view right over the racetrack's fences. And what was he doing up on this platform? Well, he wasn't just watching for fun. No. He was up there describing the entire race, play-by-play, even giving out the winners and the betting odds, live on the radio. So now people could just kick back at home, listen for free, and get all the key info they would have had to pay for at the track. I mean, this was a direct shot at Victoria Park's entire business model. So, as you can imagine, the racetrack was furious. This wasn't just some nosy neighbor. This was an existential threat to their whole operation. So, they did what you do. They took him to court. And that sparked a legal showdown that would literally redefine the idea of what you can and cannot own. And this is where it gets really interesting. The whole conflict boils down to two very different ideas. On one side, you have the racetrack. They're arguing this is what's called a legal nuisance. They're saying, look, this guy is basically stealing our event. He's stealing the spectacle that we invested all this money to create. But on the other side, the neighbor's defense was just shockingly simple. He basically said, hey, I'm on my own property, I can look at whatever I want, and I can talk about whatever I see. So this was the heart of the matter for the High Court of Australia. They had to decide whose rights were more important here. Was it the racetrack's right to make a profit from its own event, or was it the neighbor's right to just use his own land however he wanted? In other words, could the law actually protect the value of the spectacle itself? The stage was set, the arguments had been made, and now the High Court was about to deliver a landmark decision. And I mean landmark. This thing would become one of the most famous and foundational rulings in the entire history of property law. And there it is. In this incredibly powerful and straight-to-the-point ruling, the court declared, there is no property in a spectacle. Just that one sentence. And with those words, the racetrack's entire case just crumbled. You simply cannot own an event in the same way you own, say, a car or a house. What the racetrack was really asking the court to do was to invent a totally new kind of ownership right just for them, something lawyers call quasi-property. It's kind of like property, but not really tangible. And the court said, absolutely not. Why? Well, because creating new kinds of property out of thin air, that's a really dangerous game. It could open a Pandora's box of claims, and it could end up locking away information and experiences that have always been free for everyone. So let's just break down the court's logic, because it's so clear. Point by point. First, they said anyone is free to look over their fence from their own property, period. Second, you are totally free to tell other people what you see. Third, the law, as it was written, just did not recognize a race as a thing that could be owned. And finally, while it was definitely annoying for the racetrack, it just didn't meet the high legal bar for a nuisance or an invasion of privacy. So the racetrack lost. And you might think, okay, story's over. But it's not even close. In fact, the consequences of this one decision from 1937 created this kind of legal vacuum, and it had a massive ripple effect that I promise you, we still feel all around us today. That year, 1937, it became this crucial turning point. The court drew a really hard line in the sand about what property law could and could not protect.
And because of that hard line, the Victoria Park case became the foundational authority. It's the go-to example that lawyers and law students use to explain the limits of what you can own. It basically established that some things, like a view or an event, are just outside the traditional boundaries of property rights.
And you can really see the domino effect this had over the decades. After 37, sports leagues had no legal way to stop anyone from broadcasting their games. Now fast forward to the 1950s and the rise of television. Suddenly, this is a massive problem. So what happened? Well, governments had to step in. They had to create entirely new laws from scratch, what we now call broadcast rights. These rights are a legislative patch, a man-made solution designed to fill the exact legal gap that the Victoria Park case blew wide open. And those rights, they're the only reason the multi-billion-dollar sports media industry can even exist today.
And it goes way beyond sports. That core principle, that you can't own a spectacle, it continues to shape our modern debates. It touches on everything from our personal privacy to what companies are allowed to observe about us in public spaces. That fundamental tension between watching something and owning it is more relevant now than ever before.
Which really brings us to this final thought. You know, the neighbor back in 1937, he needed to build a big wooden tower. Today, anybody can fly a drone over a stadium or live stream an event from their phone. So if a spectacle still can't be owned, what does that mean for our privacy, for events, for information in this totally hyper-connected world? Where do you think we should draw the line now?